The rain hammered against the marble steps of the Kensworth Tower, and Margaret Cole clutched a torn plastic bag to her chest, unaware that in exactly 4 minutes, her life would be turned upside down in front of 200 witnesses. She had walked 11 blocks in the storm just to deliver a set of designs to the front desk, a favor for her elderly neighbor who could no longer make the trip herself. Margaret's coat was patched at the elbows, her shoes soaked through, and her graying hair stuck to her forehead in thin strands. She looked, by every measure that mattered to the man stepping out of the black town car, like someone who did not belong. Julian Ashford Whitmore III did not simply own Kensworth Tower. He was Kensworth Tower, or so he liked to believe, and when he saw the drenched, disheveled woman standing near his private entrance, something cold and cruel woke up in him. "This is a $50 million lobby," he said, his voice carrying easily across the marble expanse, "not a homeless shelter. Someone get her out before she ruins the carpet." Laughter rippled through the assembled executives and interns. Margaret did not argue. She simply lowered her eyes, apologized softly, and turned to leave the envelope with the security guard, who took it without meeting her gaze. If this story about second chances and quiet dignity is moving something in you already, take a moment to like this video, drop a comment with the word hope, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness always finds its way back, and subscribe to Hope and Wisdom for more stories like this one. What Julian did not know, what none of them knew, was that the envelope Margaret had carried through the storm contained the final blueprints for an affordable housing initiative that would later be discussed in 3 different city council meetings. Margaret Cole had once been an award-winning structural engineer, decades ago, before her husband's illness drained every account they had and left her rebuilding her life from nothing. She had traded boardrooms for a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, but she had never once stopped drawing, never stopped believing that good design could lift people out of hardship instead of just decorating the lives of those who already had everything. 3 days after the humiliation in the lobby, Julian sat in a tense boardroom meeting where his own city development team unveiled the very same housing blueprint Margaret had delivered. His chief architect, a sharp young woman named Priya Landon, explained that an anonymous consultant, someone the firm had quietly worked with for years through a non-profit partnership, had submitted the most elegant, cost-effective solution they had ever seen for converting 3 abandoned buildings into livable, dignified housing for low-income families. When Julian asked who this consultant was, Priya slid a folder across the table. Inside was a photograph of Margaret Cole, along with a decade-old article calling her one of the finest structural minds the state had ever produced. Julian felt the floor tilt beneath him. He remembered the woman in the soaked coat. He remembered his own voice echoing across that lobby, the laughter of people who worked for him, the way she had simply nodded and walked away without a single word of defense. Shame crawled up his throat like something physical. He cancelled his afternoon meetings and had his driver take him to the address listed in Margaret's file, a modest building on a quiet street where paint peeled gently from the window frames. He found her in a small community center down the block, kneeling on the floor beside a group of teenagers, showing them how to fold cardboard into scale models of the very housing units she had designed. She looked up when he entered, and there was no fear in her eyes, no need for pity, only a calm recognition that startled him more than anger would have. "Mr. Whitmore," she said simply, as though he were any other visitor. He knelt down, uncertain of his own body in a way he had not felt since childhood, and said the only thing that felt true, that he was sorry, not because his company needed her talent, but because he had looked at a human being and decided she was less than him without ever asking her name. Margaret listened, and when he finished, she told him something he would carry with him the rest of his life. She said that she had not been embarrassed that day in the lobby, because she had already survived worse than a stranger's cruelty. She had survived losing everything and choosing, every single morning afterward, to keep building anyway. She told him that kindness was not about who deserved it, but about who needed it, and that judgment was the cheapest currency in the world because it cost the giver nothing and the receiver everything. In the months that followed, Julian did not simply hire Margaret as a consultant. He restructured an entire division of Kensworth development around her vision, insisting her name appear first on every credit line, every press release, every plaque bolted to every building she touched. The housing project broke ground that spring, 3 towers rising from what had once been crumbling lots, each apartment designed with the same care Margaret had once given to luxury high-rises, because she believed poor families deserved windows that caught the morning light just as much as anyone else did. Julian visited the site often, not as an owner inspecting an investment, but as a man slowly learning to see people rather than categories. On the day the first families moved in, Margaret stood at the entrance in a simple gray coat, watching children run down hallways that smelled of fresh paint instead of mildew, and Julian stood beside her, saying nothing, because for once in his life he understood that some moments did not need his voice in them. If this story touched even a small part of your heart, please take a moment to like the video and leave a comment below, because your engagement genuinely helps stories like this reach more people who need a reminder that dignity can survive humiliation, and that kindness, however delayed, still finds its way home. Before you go, if you have 30 seconds, please comment the word kindness below, so we know these stories are reaching the hearts they were written for. Margaret Cole never asked for an apology, and she never needed one to know her own worth, but she accepted it anyway, because she understood something Julian was only beginning to learn, that grace given freely changes the giver even more than the one who receives it.